Hello, it's Abby. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at haunted house book recs. So houses that have some sort of oddity around them, as well as Gothic literature, because Gothic literature usually revolves around either houses or other buildings that are haunted in some way. So my first recommendation is a middle grade novel, Coraline by Neil Gaiman. And so Coraline follows Coraline, who has moved with her family to a new house because of her parents' job, and she is very lonely in the house. Many of you have probably seen the movie. In the movie, she makes a friend at the house, but in the book, she does not have anyone her own age there. And she gets in a lot of fights with her parents, as kids do when they're growing up. And she doesn't understand why they're saying no to certain things or not allowing her to do certain things. But she finds a mysterious keyhole in the wall and then finds the key and enters into a new secret world in the house where she meets the other mother. And the other mother lets her do the things that she wants to do, but it comes at a price. This book is very, very creepy. So keep that in mind. There was definitely times where I was like, I didn't want to read this before bed, even though it is a middle grade book. So even though it is written for a younger audience, keep in mind that it is quite scary, as the other mother has definite plans for Coraline that are very sinister. My next recommendation is an adult Gothic romance, and that is the Hacienda. The Hacienda follows Beatrice, whose father dies during the overthrow of the Mexican government, and so she marries to kind of keep a social status in the world. She's afraid that because her dad is looked at as a traitor, that she won't be able to find a good living for her and her mother. So when this guy comes along who has a lot of money and a hacienda, she marries him. But when she gets to the house, things are not good. She tries to make updates to the house. The house seems to be fighting back. None of the servants want to go into the house, even though they've lived there for years. And then Beatrice finds a body in the wall. The story is told from Beatrice's perspective, and Father Andre, who is a priest in the town, who has connections to the hacienda, and it just goes back and forth between the two of their perspectives. It is a very atmospheric book. I am someone who scares easily, and I was not scared when reading this book, but I definitely felt like I was there, that I was experiencing those things. It was very creepy and moody, but not overly like gory. So definitely a book for someone who's starting to get into the horror genre but is not quite there. Gothic is really nice for that. So definitely check out this book. One of my favorite reads of this year so far. Another very creepy house, we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and this follows Noemi. She is summoned by her cousin to this house because her cousin got married recently and feels like there's something wrong with the house, and no one believes her. And so Noemi goes to find her cousin. What she finds instead is a very creepy house with very creepy people who are set in their ways. The people who live there are white, and they have made a very like English looking mansion that they essentially came here and colonized that area. There have been different deaths at the house, and Noemi starts having dreams. The house seems like it's living, and then it's also poisoning the people. So this has a kind of mushroom horror to it, and this one definitely, like the beginning, just sort of atmospheric, you know, trying to figure out what's up with the cousin, if it's all in her head. By the end, I was very creeped out, so keep that in mind, that it gets very dark. And if you're creeped out at all by mushrooms already, keep that in mind too. But this was a really fun read, and I definitely recommend it if you are into horror and haunted houses. Next, we have two classics. We have The Turn of the Screw, which follows a young unnamed governess who goes to take care of these two children, Miles and Flora, because their parents died and their uncle is taking care of them. But by taking care of them, I just mean sending money to them and giving them a place to live. So he hires this governess, and she starts to think that things are weird with the children. The children seem to be talking to people, and they're talking to people who aren't there. There was another governess that potentially killed herself, and then a kind of foreman or a guy who used to work at the house who died unexpectedly as well. But neither of them were good people, and it seems that they corrupted the children. So the governess is trying to uncorrupt the children and find out why Miles has been sent home from school, and ultimately things go terribly wrong, and we're left questioning whether if it's all in her head or if something is actually possessing the children. But just a very creepy and very short read. This book has both The Turn of the Screw and Owen Wingrave in it, so you can see how short it is. Definitely something you could read in one day. But even though it's a classic, it is very, very creepy. My other classic recommendation is Northanger Abbey. This is actually a parody of the Gothic, and it follows Catherine. Catherine is completely unremarkable. Her family has so many children, so the Allens invite her to come to Bath with them. When in Bath, she runs into a family with a daughter named Isabel, and Isabel is very much into Gothic novels, and it goes right to Catherine's head. She is convinced that she is in a Gothic novel, and so everything that goes on from there, all of the kind of typical Jane Austen things with the different men and the courting and it being a comedy of manners is all still there. But this is one of her first books that she wrote, even though it was one of the last ones published. But Catherine just is so funny because we know that she's in normal England, but she is convinced that she is in one of these Gothic tales and that she is the heroine, and this gets her into all sorts of trouble. And she has a lot of growing up to do. So if you're looking for something on the lighter side, because we know that things aren't actually haunted, a very good parody, and actually my favorite Jane Austen book. My next recommendation is a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper, which follows a young woman who has recently given birth and is put on bed rest by her husband and her doctor, and she starts to go insane in this room because she is just trapped in a room with yellow wallpaper. I'm not going to say any more than that, but this is a really quick read and very creepy and definitely deals with patriarchy and postpartum depression and just kind of the idea that women don't know anything, that the men in their lives know what's best for them, and how this can lead to tragedy. Next we have two books by Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House and We Have Always Lived in the Castle. The Haunting of Hill House is definitely more your typical spooky haunted mansion. Hill House is uninhabited, but this doctor decides that he is going to bring together a team of people and they're all going to stay in Hill House for the summer, and things just start going horribly wrong. I thought that this one was mostly atmospheric and not a lot happens in it, but you have the typical Shirley Jackson themes of the whole community being against them, being in Vermont and away from civilization, and just the idea that of women being susceptible to being possessed or haunted. I particularly liked the doctor's wife who came in near the very end, who was doing the typical things that you would do in a haunted house, like using a planchette and trying to talk to spirits in the house, and how her experience is completely different from those who are actually being haunted in the house. I personally liked We Have Always Lived in the Castle better, which follows Mary Cat, who lives with her sister and her uncle. Her uncle is an invalid because their whole family was poisoned, including Uncle Julian. And the whole community is convinced that Constance, the sister, is the one who murdered everybody. But we kind of have to figure out what's going on here. There's more to the story. And just watch the people of the community, again, turn on them as not part of the actual Vermont community, and just the kind of the sisterly bond as they deal with an outsider coming into their home, trying to take possession of it, because of course it can't belong to two women and an invalid man. So this distant cousin comes in to try to take it all away from them. Next we have A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, which is about a girl named Sam who goes back to North Carolina to stay with her mom because she's in like her 20s, but her job, which was excavating and looking at bugs, falls through because there's a body found in the excavation site. But when she gets back, her mom is acting very strange. Like, her mom has always been very liberal and very like full of life, but the house has been reverted back to how it was when her grandmother lived there. So everything is white and pink and the roses are there, but there's no bugs in the garden. There's a vulture out on the front, which supposedly belongs to a neighbor. And the mom has put up a Confederate wedding picture in her house that used to stand there when the grandmother was alive, but which she had immediately replaced when moving into the house. And so Sam's trying to figure out what's wrong with her mother and what's going on in the house. And I have not finished this yet, but so far I'm enjoying it. I really like T. Kingfisher's humor, and that shines through in this book. So it's not very scary, but it's a nice and kind of cozy, funny horror. So a good book to check out. Moving away from just houses, we have The Horror Hotel, which follows a group of YouTubers who go into a hotel looking for ghosts. And they don't tell their parents that they're going to this hotel. It is a YA book, and one of the girls can actually hear spirits and commune with them. And so when they get there, they're expecting that they'll just go and have a really good video for, I think it's like their 100th episode or something. But instead, they run into a murderer, and they are not sure that they're going to get out of the hotel alive. But this book is only 242 pages, and a lot of it is like blocked out as far as like big chapter headings, things like that. So this is again a book you could read in a day, which is just spooky, atmospheric, etc. Another YA, we have The Hazelwood, which is about 17-year-old Alice, and Alice's grandmother is a famous writer of very dark fairy tales, and she wants to know more about her grandmother. She has never been to the Hazelwood, but the grandmother dies and her mother goes missing, and she needs to go in and solve what has happened and enter the Hazelwood. So again, this is not really a haunted house, but a haunted forest that doesn't even exist on maps, and follows Alice, her friend and classmate Ellery Finch, who need to find out what is happening and get her mother back. And then the very last one, which is probably my favorite, just straight Gothic novel, is Picnic at Hanging Rock, and this is Australian Gothic. It follows a group of girls at a boarding school. They go out on a picnic for St. Valentine's Day, and they go to a place called Hanging Rock, and Hanging Rock is one of those places that is very much out in the bush. It is away from things, and a place that is known for spiritual activity. A couple of the girls, including Miranda, go up to climb the hanging rocks and explore more, and everyone else at the picnic falls asleep, including the teachers. And when they wake up, these girls are missing. One of them later comes back in the story and talks about the fact that she can't remember anything. Also, a teacher went missing too. The people in the community aren't super helpful. They do put out a search party, but this place is known for, again, being spiritual, being haunted, and people have kind of weird visions, loss in time, things like that. There's not really a lot that happens in this book. The girls go missing, one of the girls comes back. There's people who are trying to court the different girls at the boarding school. There's also a lot of conflict at the school itself with how the girls are being treated. But the whole thing is just very spooky and atmospheric, and we have this kind of mystery of what happened to the girls. Did it just go that they went out there and died, but no one has found their bodies, things like that. And also this mass sleeping where they all fall asleep, and kind of this idea of mass hysteria, only with the sleeping and the being put under sort of a spell. This book came out in 1967. There has been a movie and a TV adaptation of it. The movie has such eerie music in it, and then the TV adaptation goes a little further into who this Mrs. Appleyard is and why she has a college for girls in the middle of the woods in Australia. But those are my haunted house and Gothic book recs. If you have any recommendations for either haunted houses or books that have a Gothic feel to them, leave them in the comments. And next week we're going to be looking at vampires, werewolves, and other monsters. So I'll see you then.